It's Edge Radio Australia. It's time for a very big subject, and I don't know how to warm up to this, really. We've got Terry in the building here. Lovely to see you, Terry. Really happy you're here.
Thank you, Aaron.
Fantastic.
Likewise, as
Now,
always.
Always a pleasure. Now, let's talk about what we're going to call this show, because we're in the genius zone, right? Okay, is that where we are?
We are indeed.
Okay.
We're in Terry Messenger's genius zone. Not my genius zone, but the zone of genius where people jump in.
Yep.
So this lady has actually literally jumped in with 2 feet and a heartbeat, and she doesn't even know what she's going to get herself in for.
I'm pretty impressed, actually. We'll introduce Michelle. Now, Michelle, you're here on a subject no one wants to talk about, okay? It's happening, all over the place. People make all sorts of stories. People use it. People weaponize it in both directions.
Absolutely.
We need to get into this. And the thing about Edge, I was going to say we love the hard questions and the hard conversations, but this is such an important conversation. It has to be had and not edited, not chopped to bits, not selling this with someone's narrative. So thank you very much for being here. Really looking forward to it. I don't know. I just know the subject matter. Not sure where this is going to go. So it could be very creative. Who knows? But I'll put
It's going to be very interesting, Aaron.
I'll put that in your hands, whole station. You're in control there, Terry.
Oh, my
Careful.
gosh, that could be dangerous.
Very, very.
Okay, so here we go. So firstly, we've got a rather interesting scenario here as the universe kind of brings people together. And Michelle, you are obviously somebody who has gone through DV, and I didn't even know what DV stood for. And of course, would you like to just explain what DV is and what it stands for?
I think there's different terms that we now know it as. DV itself, that abbreviation is domestic violence, but I think we need to broaden that to domestic abuse because I think when people hear violence, I think there's a connotation of a physical aspect, but I think so much of domestic abuse is emotional, mental and financial. It's the scope is far beyond the physical.
Thoroughly agree with that. Huge point to make because, look, we're so used to hearing that term DV, domestic violence. People think about the physicality of it, which is awful. I mean, let's face it, it's awful. No one wants that. But there are so many other ways to abuse and to control people and to damage them.
I think there's this notion of, when someone's physically laying hands on another person, that's domestic violence and that's abuse. But in my experience, a lot of mine was not physical and I did experience the physical as well. And for me, the emotional, the mental was so much worse than the physical. The scars are so much deeper.
Okay.
And not to mention just yourself, but the kids as well.
Absolutely. It's a family unit. It extends to yourself, your beautiful cubs, and so much, I guess, societal pressure. We're led to believe since we're little this belief of a nuclear family, you stay together at all costs. Your children, and I came from parents married for 40 years, broken home. That word was just so taboo to me. I would never break a home.
I can't help but smile, but I just felt, I just can identify with that so strongly. I had wonderful parents, mum and dad together, in love till the day my mum passed away. That's what you see and that's what you want to emulate.
Yeah, I thought, that I found the love of my life. I married my soulmate. I wouldn't even give birth until we shared the same last name. I would never give birth out of wedlock. I was so traditional because that's how I was raised.
Sure.
And I just never thought, my white picket fence would be absolutely imploded.
Yeah.
Or somebody would paint it black.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and everything I never thought my life would become happened overnight.
Yeah. Now, I tend to have this theory that everything happens for a reason.
Me too.
Right? And, are there any mistakes? And are even the abusers deliberately abusing, or are they coming from a really, really dark space themselves? My husband always says you cannot give away something you haven't got. Right.
Okay.
So, quite often if people come in and see me for therapy, I had a young woman who came to see me and she just couldn't get past the hatred and bitterness she had for her father.
Okay.
But her father had actually passed on. And I knew that we weren't going to go, forward while she still held this resentment. And I think everything really does come down to resentment. And, you know, that's what really hurts. You look like you're going to say something.
I, you know, throughout this process, there's been so much educating myself as to, like, I could never understand how these things were happening to me, and how someone I loved so deeply could destroy me in such a way. But I remember someone told me early in the journey, it's a phrase that I'll never forget: hurt people hurt people.
So true. It is so true. And like, it's very interesting. Once you've gone through this, you obviously have been through DV, and it's changed you forever. I'm exactly the same. I've been through this experience, and I hate the word victim with an absolute passion.
Me too.
Really do.
Amen.
Yep.
Can I just tell the listeners that for a moment there, when I said to Michelle that Aaron was also in the same boat of DV, the first thing that happened was Michelle looked at Aaron thinking that you were the perpetrator.
Isn't that sad?
Now,
Well,
you know, like
it wasn't
thinking-
even a natural assumption. It was just the way that you phrased the sentence. And then I
Right.
thought, wow, this conversation is going to get very interesting
Yes.
if it's a perpetrator victim situation in the same room, and we're going to have very complex conversations about being on the opposite sides of that team.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and in Tara's defense, she was sort of saying the opposite because of
Yes.
gender,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah,
And obviously a lot of people don't believe that the men are on the other side of domestic violence.
And I think
That's a
that's,
big
something
problem.
I struggle with too, because I know personally situations where that is the case. I think because it's such a sway that gender violence is so predominantly the way that we believe it to be,
Sure.
where females are victims, but absolutely males are victims.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Anybody can be a victim
Of course,
family
absolutely.
violence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as I sit here, it's funny. I mean, this is what I do. Okay, I sit down and have conversations with people. I can feel literally a quiver in my voice. I can actually feel a discomfort because, like, when you're with people who have been through similar experiences, you feel it's a just hard thing to explain, but you feel like almost a camaraderie.
Mhm.
You feel like they understand.
Mm.
At the same time, when you're on the male side of things, you almost feel guilt or a weakness, which is, you know, it's a terrible thing. And as a man, you don't ever want to feel weak, full stop, let alone in front of, you know, two lovely women. But it's very, very interesting how much it gets into your psyche. And I love the fact that you've gone straight onto the front foot, and you're talking about the fact that, you know, so much of this is emotional abuse, so much of this is financial or whatever, these other aspects, okay? This manipulation and controlling behavior. I think they do far more damage, the psychological stuff, than the physical stuff. I mean, no one wants to hurt another human being. Well, if you do, there's something wrong with you. But, you know, to actually hurt someone emotionally and to make them carry those scars for life, damage to your body, you get fixed. Okay, simple as that. You can fix a body, but we'll tell you right.
I think there's also a caveat to that, which I don't want to diminish the physical, because I have women that follow me in the online space. I share my life publicly on social media on the daily, and I have women that follow me that I have very deep conversations with, who their abuse that they experience is largely physical, and I can't put to words. Like, hearing their stories makes you feel sick to the stomach.
I absolutely
and
appreciate
theirs
that. Yeah.
is majority physical. So I just don't want anybody who's listening to this that it's largely physical to think that it's less than, because it's not. But yeah,
No, it's just another way of someone
absolutely.
controlling you,
Exactly.
whether they do it
Horrific.
physically, emotionally, whatever the case may be. It's wrong, full stop. I mean, and it shows that there is something wrong with that person, because they have got pain from somewhere else, and they're trying to relieve their pain by pushing it on to someone who's theoretically supposed to be the person they love.
Yeah.
Right?
And like you said, Michelle, hurting people hurt people. And one of the biggest breakthroughs that I found with clients is, even when, you know, a woman like this specific person I'm speaking of, she was a woman, hated this person's guts for what he'd actually done to her. It was, how do you shift that? Because by actually holding that kind of pain within, it's giving that other person so much power, and it's really holding them captive. And, you know, in her case, if she hadn't have done something about it for the rest of her life. And interesting, one of the things that I actually did was I got her to go back on a timeline, because obviously with NLP and the work that I do, and she went back on her father's timeline. So she was able to go back to when he was just a little boy. And she was able to look at him as an innocent child.
Right.
And she was able to then see what he'd gone through and actually stand in his shoes. And then when I said to her, what did he need? Everything that he stole from her security, her sense of love,
Self-worth.
and her sense of self-worth, every single thing that she didn't have, he needed. And she identified it, that he needed love, he needed self-worth, he needed that sense of security. So that was where the gift is, that the whole kind of dynamic almost changes, because all of a sudden she's holding this innocent child who was her perpetrator. And as she's holding him, she's giving him every single thing that he wasn't able to give to her.
Wow.
So as she's giving that to him, and you know what? Oh my gosh, her gifts that arose from that. But what I really want to kind of observe is, firstly, for people that perhaps a little bit naive, like myself, about DV. I mean, obviously, I was aware of the physical abuse. Can you talk me through the financial abuse and the mental abuse, and what kind of things happens in that scenario?
So for me, mine was, as I've spoken about before, largely emotional and mental. I did a lot of research post me experiencing this abuse and it all commencing, so I could get an understanding of what was happening to me. And one of the biggest things I learned is, for me, my abuser focused on the three things that I love most.
Okay.
So they will systematically work out what defines you, what makes you feel whole, what gives you purpose. And for me, that was my children, my family, and my career, my life in business.
Okay.
So we were in business together. I was in a male-dominated industry, dominating as a female in that space.
Good on you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm a mechanical consultant by trade.
Oh, so cool. Hang on, you've just gone up in value 10 points on me. There you go. Love it.
Yeah, so I ran my own workshops for the last 10 years, so private dealership. I had a mechanical team underneath me, running all facets of the company and dominating in that space, doing it very, very well. But on the daily, he would tap into those three things. So it'd be comments about my motherhood, that I'm an inadequate mother, but it would even just be really trivial daily things where you would hear the sentence leave his mouth and then you'd stop and you would go, oh shit, like, really? That's a bit harsh. I was running 2 companies with 2 toddlers. My boys are only less than 2 years apart. I was a hustler.
Yeah.
I was an incredible wife, a mother, a provider, and I just couldn't understand,
Do you think he was jealous? Like, I hear that it's very hard if a woman, and in fact, this is something really known in the coaching space, if one party, especially the woman, is elevating, then the man, by natural forces, is trying to pull her back.
No, a weak man does that. That's how I see it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's just a weak human being who doesn't, like, I say this all the time, okay, like, as far as business success or whatever, the way to do it, in my opinion, is not to step on the backs of others, it's to take them with you, right? Okay. So if people are aspiring, they're working hard like you were, then his job, quite frankly, is to jump on that bandwagon and help you as much as he can, work hard, and the two of you as a team, and that's how I see a marriage, as a team, build that together. And I think that's beneficial for both of you. I think it lifts you both up.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting dynamic because we were married, we had a family, we lived together, worked together. Basically, the only time we were apart was when I was doing daycare or school run.
Okay.
And I felt it a privilege to be able to spend that much time with my significant other and to build an empire with him. But then it progressively, because we were in this male-dominated space, for instance, I would have a male colleague walk into my workshop who was following me on socials, watching me build our company, and say to me, wow, Michelle, like, you're really impressive.
Right.
And there'd be statements like, you know, if I had a wife like you or a woman like you in my workshop, I know I would be a lot more successful than I am now.
Mm,
And he would be stood next to me and overhear this sentence
sure.
and belittle me in front of this other male.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And because the penny hadn't dropped for me at this point, you would stand there and go, like, here I am working myself to the bone to be the most incredible partner, mother, business owner, you know, everything. For what?
That's his inadequacy.
Absolutely.
I have absolutely
Yes.
lived, like, as you're saying it, you're writing my script. I honestly, it's and why do they need to do it? Like, when you're there in public and you're with your peers and you're achieving, you're doing really well. They need to belittle it,
Because you
don't they?
know why? That ego is so self-serving, this numero uno. If the attention is not on them, if that spotlight gets taken off them even for a second, I
Sure.
want that spotlight straight back on me. I
Yeah.
don't want this man standing here praising my wife.
Mhm.
I want him praising me,
Of course.
but he's not.
Yeah,
And
no,
what am I going to
totally
do
agree.
So they'll
to break
stand
that?
on you
Absolutely.
to
At
push
all
you
costs.
down,
Yep.
and then to
But it was
rise
even
up.
like, I've got a
Wow.
really specific example. So a lot of our suppliers and, you know, colleagues, you know, when you talk to people a lot on the phone, ordering parts, whatever it may be, you don't know what they physically look
Yeah,
like.
of course.
So we went to a trade show where we systematically bumped into all our colleagues, parts suppliers. And throughout this couple of hours, maybe 4 or more times, people come up and sort of said, oh, shit, like, you're punching. Like, we didn't know what we were talking to over the phone type thing.
There you go.
Which I was like, oh, gosh, okay.
Yeah, it's nice to have a compliment,
Like,
right?
thank you so
yeah.
much. And then we got back to the hotel room to get ready for the ball post the expo. And I jokingly said to my husband, oh, gosh, you know, everybody seems to think you've got a hot missus. So for context, I've lost 60 kilos and
Oh, well
completely
done.
transformed my life. And his comment in return to that was, oh, they wouldn't have said that if they'd seen you before.
Wow. Wow.
My gosh.
And you just, again, because the penny hadn't dropped of what I was in, I stood there while getting glammed to go to a ball with him. And I thought to myself, oh, why would he respond in such a way to people complimenting his wife?
It's almost like that other, you know, we're told as females, if somebody says, oh, you've got a nice outfit on, or compliments your hair, rather than underestimating it and saying, oh, you know, it was just a cheap outfit, or, you know, oh, my hair actually looks, you know, you sort of self-demote yourself. It's almost like he was doing that, like your alter ego, like, just in case you're thinking that you're really hot because somebody told you that, I'm just reminding you that, remember about, you know,
well,
2
again,
years
like
ago?
in a lot of ways,
That's really bad.
context
really
of the
is.
story, my weight loss was the catalyst for the abuse.
Really?
So, you know, in hindsight, everything's a lot clearer, isn't it?
It really is. It really
My
is.
weight was his security blanket.
Yep.
No man was looking twice at me. I was a very large, not that attractive woman. I can say that about myself. You know, people will still say,
I don't buy it, but okay. I mean,
people will still say, Michelle, you're a pretty larger woman, but, you know, I obviously didn't feel that way.
sure. Ultimately, it's about how you feel about yourself, right?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
completely
So
understand.
in hindsight, absolutely, everything was a downward spiral once I made that decision to dramatically change the way I look. Although there wasn't the hair and the makeup and everything there is now, just the fact that, you know, I was of a healthy weight and it was getting a lot of attention. Again, that was attention that he wasn't getting.
A lot of people are going to throw around, and I hear it all the time, okay?
Yep.
Narcissism, right? Like, it's just become the buzzword, okay? Now,
I have such problems with this. I almost have this conversation on the weekly.
right.
People can just be douches,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You can just be
Yeah.
dating dickbags.
Yep.
Like, they're just, you know, they're a bit insecure, they're a bit weak, they're a bit, you know, here nor there, but they're not narcissists.
No, they're not.
And the way that word is bandied around grinds my gears, because unless you've really experienced true narcissism and how that plays out, it diminishes
It
that
does.
for people like me.
It certainly does. Yeah.
Because there's a big
Yes.
difference between narcissism and being a bit of a dick.
because everybody's gaslighting each other these days,
Yeah,
isn't it?
even the word
Like,
gaslighting,
you know,
like,
that's the whole big, you know, word that you hear, the buzzword.
Oh, we love a
you know,
buzzword, don't
yeah,
we?
and of course,
we-
because you know of
absolutely.
the realm that reality TV has
Mm.
come to now
Mhm.
is absolutely glorifying
Oh, it does.
gaslighting and
Mhm.
Narcissism.
yeah,
yeah.
making it normal and putting a spotlight on that in potentially a positive way. Get drama, get ratings.
Well, look, the saying in media is if it bleeds, it leads,
Mhm.
right? So they create drama. So all the reality shows, it's fake drama. It's pushed. They do horrible psychological things to
Mhm.
these people to
Yep.
create ratings,
Mhm.
right?
Yes,
They don't
yes.
care about them. And I look, it's very sad, you know, sort of indictment of the world, effectively, that
Mhm.
that people are attracted to watching that, you know.
Mm.
But we do see a big change. We do see that sort of going on. People are getting more in touch with doing more positive things and building each other up. But you know, there's still that. I mean, and when you've got the mass media, you've got the entertainment industry, you've got, you know, look, companies like Disney who just push that kind of narrative.
Mhm.
It's hard to get away from.
I guess, to put into context for people that don't necessarily understand the ways of abuse and how abusers, that their psychology works, I guess. Oh shit, I've completely lost my train of thought.
Well, can I just throw this in while you collect your thoughts?
Yep.
What you're saying is, I mean, look, you've hit every mark for me. The reality is that once you've gone through, you experience this. What I tend to do is you go and do your education, and you go back, and now you look back and go, oh well, now that I know this, and this, and this, you have to educate yourself. I think the education of narcissism, or in my case, I was married to a sociopath, all that sort of thing. That education is, in a lot of ways, you're part of your healing. It's kind of the way.
Absolutely. It's just
solve
come
it.
to me. I've got so many thoughts
She's got
buzzing
it.
around.
She's got
And
it.
my
I
first
saw the
experience on radio,
eyes
I was
light up.
like, so the biggest difference for me is when I did this hardcore education, because
Okay.
I'm a driven, educated woman, university educated. I think knowledge is power. And that's what I spent a lot of my journey, you know, in that initial acute phase post-abuse, was educating myself. And what I learned is, when there's this true narcissism, their brains are actually physically wired completely different.
They
So
are.
it's not they're just being a bit of a douche.
That's interesting.
So I know with my abuser's timeline exactly when that inner child was not loved,
Right.
and exactly how that transpired. I
So
know that in
tell
depth.
me about that. I'm very interested. I was going to ask you, you know, like, what constitutes a narcissist, and
Mhm.
where does that come from? So, you know, quite often they'll say that people's weakness, when their weakness comes out, they'll go back to the age where they've had a trauma, or they'll revert back to an age where something actually happened. So what is it that you see that's happened to that person that has actually triggered the nature of the narcissist?
So I'm also a pediatric oncology nurse by trade. So I am a baby and children's nurse originally. So I've got a lot of, I guess, extra training around the development of a baby and
Sure.
a fetus, and all of your vital neuronal connections. So when your brain essentially grows its wiring, everything you learn and all your foundations for life are established between 0 and 4 years old.
Okay.
Wow.
So if you experience a significant trauma or a massive lacking within that phase, that's when those wires are being made and formed.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
How they're firing,
Yes.
how they're connecting. So, for example, a true narcissist who has that lacking in that wiring system, basic things like, they actually don't experience things like empathy.
Empathy is the biggie.
So when someone said to me, when I was doing this research, that they don't actually experience the emotion of empathy, I thought to myself, what in the world? Like, what do they mean? They don't experience it.
How is that possible?
And then I have looked back and reflected on my marriage and times where there should have been extreme empathy towards me, and it was lights on, nobody's home, a blank
Okay.
stare at me,
Wow.
almost like, quit your complaining.
Okay.
And I can absolutely agree with the statement that my abuser doesn't experience empathy, and I see it still play out to this day.
Mhm.
And I think that's because I'm the opposite of that.
Mm.
I really struggle with the belief that that a person is actually incapable of experiencing an emotion like that.
But these people will seek out those who have very strong empathy.
Correct.
That it's just a red rag to a
Yes.
bull. Absolutely.
And you'll
looking
see
for
that
it.
play
Yeah,
out
that makes
in this
sense.
codependency, and when they, you know, when your marriage ends, in the partners that they choose in their future relationships. There's so many similarities between myself and those people.
Wow. So they're
Mm-hmm.
attracted to the same sort of people. And
Mhm.
isn't it funny though? Because Michelle, we were talking a little bit just before we came on, and you said you had like that beautiful family life. You know, you grew up, you went to uni, you had this amazing life, and then you married a narcissist and you had this situation happen to you,
Mhm.
like totally left field. So let's unpack that, because in my way of what I do with communications and things like that, you have, when you've got a really, really unhealthy relationship, both male and female, or whatever it is, anything goes these days, are attracted to each other purely and simply because it's almost like a soul contract. It's almost a codependency. So they're like a magnet to
Mhm.
each other, and they come together and then they click, and there's this incredible chemistry. Like the chemistry is mind blowing, and then apparently it just slowly falls apart and, you know, goes downhill. If you were like, let's just do a little experiment, and anybody listening to this conversation, if you've gone through DV yourself, or you've had any kind of a situation like Michelle where there's been trauma, you might like to kind of do this exercise yourself. So if you were able to zoom like right out, I mean, going from where you are right up into the planetarian stars, the sun, all the rest of it, right? So you're in a timeless space and you go right back to, let's just say, an age where you're very comfortable, an age where life's cruising, everything's cool, you haven't met your perpetrator yet, it's all good. Firstly, can you recognize an age where everything was just either status quo or even a moment of time before that had happened where you were just fine?
I think that's an interesting question, because a lot of my teenage years were spent caring for an incredibly ill mum.
Right.
So I think this plays out in, you know, the person who I chose to be my husband as well.
It does.
I was, I think, in large, never the child. I was the parent.
Right. Yes.
I was the fixer.
Yes.
I was the matriarch.
Mhm.
And with every hospital admission, I was her advocate. I protected her. I literally gave her CPR and saved her life.
Wow.
Wow.
So lots of heavy, and this was a decade's worth.
So is this teenage years?
Teenage years. Yeah.
Okay. So in your teenage years, you had become your mother's carer, and that's a really big one too. So in that case, if that was a fairly significant time of your life, was there a time before that then when mum was well, when maybe you were just enjoying life and, you know, maybe being a little girl or a little boy if you're listening, and just really kind of, you know, happy, spirited, you know, like liberated, how a child is liberated, just being able to have fun and play. Can you kind of recognize a moment of time, even if it was at your grandmother's, or, you know, just one moment of time in your life like that?
I think it was early on for me, before things got heavy and before I took on everything that I did. I would say maybe around 8 or 9.
Perfect. So this is generally what we do, right? So if you are zooming out, right? So obviously it's not a therapy full-on session, but this is what we would actually say, because this is all about the genius zone, looking at the reason that you are who you are and the reason that things have happened to you really making that big difference in your life. So you go back, you zoom out, you go into that timeless space. You look down at that child having fun. You look down at that moment when everything in your life is footloose, fancy free, and you're just having, you know, just so present and in the
I've
moment.
actually got a photograph in my head
Yeah.
of that.
And what you do is you do something a little creative, you do something a little bit out there, and they call it sacred geometrical coding
Mhm.
and quantum leaping. Sorry about the jargon. So let's just talk about it from firstly, the quantum leap. So let's pretend that you're going to go down to where you are, where you're happy, where you're with that inner child, happy, everything is fine and dandy. And you're going to whisper into that younger inner child's ears and into their physical being your big mission for your life. Because you have wisdom, right? Because you're the age you are. So what
Sure.
you're doing is you're bringing the wisdom of your age now, but you're going back to the innocent child, telling them this is what, right, you want to be when you grow up. This is what you want to be. This is the Oprah Winfreys of the world. This is the people that, you know, that have got mission and vision and purpose. And just whisper that. So if you could even get just a fleeting glimpse of that,
Mhm.
just picture that happening. And if you can't picture it now, maybe you can do it a little bit later, or your superconscious will do it. Now, the most important part is now that you've shared that with that child, because remember, that child's innocent, that
Sure.
child has had no experience. And wouldn't it be great to just go back and make so many changes in your life?
Before we were all tainted.
Yeah, that's right. Can you imagine you never sold that piece of real estate,
Oh.
so you held on to it, and
There'd probably
as
be a lot less
result,
crime in the
boom.
world, right?
There were a lot. Come on, let's
We'd
face it.
probably all be
you
a
know.
little bit more
We
stable.
were be holding hands singing Kumbaya at this stage. Come on.
There wouldn't be wars.
Absolutely.
No.
And look, you guys, you know what? This is the magic of recoding, because we know that would be the case, that, you know, we don't live in a perfect world, but the rewiring and the refiring is about this, because
Okay.
there's something that little child is innocent, that little child, you can get a piece of that, and you can just raise up above that child, knowing that there is nothing there happening, and go, right, I had to meet with that trauma.
Mhm.
I had to meet with that calamity. I had to meet, because people have generally got many crises that are going on in their lives.
Of course.
So let's just say for you, you know, pretty much raising your own mother. Aaron, we know you've got, you know, your own cross to bear.
Sure.
You've a few
We all do.
fires.
This is the thing.
Yeah, a few fires lit in your life.
It's all
Quite
you know,
literally, but there you go.
Yeah, no pun
But
intended.
it's all human experience, isn't it?
Well, it
Like
is,
the
it
experience
is.
of being alive and being human.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know what? Some of the horrible things that have happened to us, they make us, okay? They create who we are, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I'm listening to you, and these horrible experiences have made you a stronger person, okay? In my opinion. Well, I didn't know you before,
Mhm.
but I see this strength in you, and that impresses the hell out of
Exactly.
You know, it's funny. Like I had that, you know, that light bulb moment one day. I was, you know, in court where I'd become from a protected glass room, because that's how bad it got at times. I'd walk
Right.
into a courthouse and I'd be in a protected space before having to be near him,
Was this literally?
literally, Yep.
Right.
because the threat was that high at the time.
Wow.
Because I was physically assaulted in the early stages, and then had restraining orders, and yeah, it's been a whole journey. And there was one day where I was sat across a table from him, you know, only a meter apart, and that fight or flight within me, you know, everything's screaming at you to get out. But I just sat in that moment and I looked across at him and I thought, I'm actually so thankful. You've gifted me,
Mhm.
That's right.
because I am now this unstoppable force.
Yep.
Because I've had to essentially become a lawyer. I could almost have a law degree at this point for,
Yes.
you know, I'm 5 years in with potentially another 3 to go. I've just found out.
Is that
So
right?
that's right. Yeah. So I'm 5 years deep, and I just failed in family court little over 2 weeks ago, where basically they said, cool, you're set down for trial. We'll see you in 3 years.
She went to court the same day as me.
Oh,
Family
wow.
court's a whole
So,
other. I could
yeah.
do a whole
Mm.
podcast series about
Couldn't
the
we?
lackings in the
Yeah.
family
And maybe
court
we
system.
should, because the family court
Yes.
is without doubt, in my opinion, the most damaging and evil organization on earth.
Wow.
I seriously mean this. Like, we have this image in our minds of child abusers and dirty old men that, you know, flash children and hurt children and whatever. Okay. We have these horrible images. There's more people that abuse children who work for the family court than there is those people. The family court is full of the most evil. And I'm not saying every
Mm.
person there, because obviously there's some great people in there, right? But I'll be frank, most of the people who are attracted to that industry are people who enjoy, they get sexually excited by damaging and destroying others. I have watched it with my own eyes.
Yeah,
I've
that makes sense. That actually makes sense. It's a bit like the Catholic Church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It
I've
attracts
just found
particular
too,
type.
my experience in the family court is that it's largely male dominated.
Right.
And I've had just such a horrible experience in that I think I'm the exception to a lot of rules, where I think there is a lot of women that weaponize their children, you know, against their ex-husbands, and males do cop the poor end of the stick a lot of time. There's no denying that. But in my case, I was there fearful of my life.
Sure.
And, here's another, you know, scorned ex-wife trying to punish her
But
husband.
I thoroughly agree with you. Now, here's the problem.
Mm.
People who have legitimate concerns for their health and safety,
Mhm.
where we've got dangerous people out there, they get pushed aside because, quite frankly, here's the stats, unfortunately. If you're a man going to family court, there is an 84.1% chance that you will lose your children. Okay? It's a fact.
84.1% just
84.1.
for being a male.
Just from being a male. Okay.
Jeepers.
So unfortunately, because so many women have weaponized the legal system, it takes away from the real victims
Mhm.
and the people who need to be protected and the kids who need to be protected. It's so horrible to see this. You see beautiful children who have got the future right in front of them, who are having their lives destroyed, and the mums and the dads. Okay. Also, people can make it is all about billable hours. It is all about income. And I do believe it's a financial thing for the destruction of the family. That's my own personal opinion, for long-term sort of changes in the world. But I thoroughly agree. It upsets me because, okay, as a man, I speak up about this a lot. Okay, I'm quite large in this space as well, and you get everything thrown at you. Oh, you're a misogynist. You're this. You're
Mhm.
anti-women.
Mhm.
Hello. How can I possibly be anti-women? Okay,
You're sitting with two in the room right now.
I am.
And it happens to be your room.
My longest friend, my closest friend, my best friend, 29 years. She's a woman. My business partners all through my life have all been women. I've been a member of 2 political parties, both run by women. I took on the job of staying at home as a stay-at-home dad. I was a single dad on my own, but also became a single dad with 6 children. Okay.
Wow.
These are not the things that a person who hates
You don't
women.
have 6 children, do you, Aaron?
I do have 6 children.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you learn
3
something new every day.
Oof.
3 biological.
Two's enough for me.
Oh.
Keeps me busy.
3 biological and 3. I missed out on the manufacturing, but I was there for the development and the marketing.
The parts that matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But and I don't want to sit here and just talk about me. Where I'm going on this is the fact that we need to talk about this. We need to be honest about it, and we need to stop picking sides, because I don't want violence against men. I don't want violence against women. As a man, I was raised to protect women. Okay. That's part of my DNA.
Yeah.
And when I see this, because of people lying and because of weaponizing of the system, some horrible men out there are getting away with it. Obviously the same with women as well. We need to remember DV is not gender based. Okay.
No,
it really isn't.
Exactly.
If it was,
Yes.
okay, here's another statistic to probably frighten you. Guess which group have the largest DV as far as social group right now, have the largest occurrences of DV? There'll be a long silence here. Lesbian couples. That's statistically the
Okay.
situation. Right now, lesbian couples have more DV
Is
than
that
any
right?
other group if you're
Wow.
breaking the groups up.
Interesting.
Crazy, isn't it?
Mm.
So, you know what? Throw this
Well, they're not
whole...
going to prejudice against it, are they?
Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So let's throw all this gender rubbish away, right?
Mm.
Okay. I should be able to sit
Absolutely.
here and support Michelle and others like
Yeah,
you. We
yeah.
just stop
Well,
doing
you're
this.
both people, aren't you?
We are
You're
exactly
both
right.
people, and just because it doesn't, it's like saying, oh well, a man can have a good personality, but a woman can't because a woman's a woman. A
Women are
man,
awesome. Without
yeah,
women, we
but,
don't exist. Hello.
the fact, I know, but really, the truth of the matter is, just anything that a man, can have in a character strength, a woman can have,
Of course.
good, bad, happy, or sad.
Mm.
So really, it makes sense that it's not prejudiced. I've also seen a lot of men that have gone through it, myself as well.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people have actually gone through DV and not even realized it, especially specifically when you're talking about the financial side of it, the mental side of it. But, here's the part. Have you ever kind of noticed that a lot of people, they will attract the same sort of situation over and over and over? This is something that I see all the time in practice. It's like patterns that, I'm in that same situation again. Here I go again. And this is a pattern. And the reason that the pattern continues is because the person, it's not that they deserved to have that happen to them, because nobody deserves it, but there's a lesson. And the lesson is not because they deserved it, but the lesson is because it is associated with the mission, vision, and purpose for your greater good on your future in your life. So let me just give an example. This is my belief around Terry Messenger's Genius Zone, right? Oprah Winfrey. Now, she impacted many thousands of people, in as a philanthropist, in all of what she did. But she was that person who came through as a Black woman born in a time when people were prejudiced against
So
Black people.
I've got a very different opinion about Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
I believe she's one of the most destructive women in history.
Really?
I think she's a vile human being. I think I actually genuinely believe she's a narcissist.
Yep.
I think she's probably sociopathic as well.
Okay.
Or psychopathic, one of the two.
Yep.
And if you actually follow her journey and do the research on her, I'm afraid, look, everything you've just said, on the surface seems very, very
real.
But
she still succeeded in her mission.
Yeah.
She still succeeded in impacting thousands of people's lives.
Oh, millions.
And even if she is all those things that you just said, she couldn't have done and impacted the people that she'd done without the experience she'd had. So her life experience, we don't have to go back into that. But even people like Tony Robbins, he's popularized NLP. He stands for what he stands for because of his upbringing.
Sure.
I'm passionate about the work that I do because I grew up feeling very much low self-worth, had a lot of self-doubt, and had a lot of abuse in my own way that I suffered as a teenager growing up. So to be able to turn that trauma around, and as I said to you before, turn the story into the glory. So if you were rounding up this last piece, if you were looking at that 8-year-old child and you were risen above that 8-year-old child, knowing you went through everything and having whispered a mission into their life, if you put that mission out into the future, and that mission was you doing exactly what you really, really, really know that you
I know exactly
what
I would say to her.
Okay, I love that. But this is a rhetorical here, right, boys and girls?
Oh, that's a shame because I want to hear, but okay.
But she can tell it. She can share. But the element is, what was the purpose that you had to literally go through every single fire that you went through, every single pain that you went through? What was the purpose that it had for your mission that is in your future? Now, that is the question, and I'd love you to share, but that's what literally I find brings people into that fireball of their zone of genius
Okay.
and transmutes it, and also really just tips it on a different edge of saying, well, boom. Now it's like you teaching the 17-year-old or the 16-year-old how to drive a car.
Yep.
They know how to drive. You can get out and let them drive now. They don't need you anymore. So you didn't need the narcissist anymore. But somehow or rather, at that time of your life, you did.
It's true. It's
Mhm.
true. I mean, these people are sent to us to teach us something.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I've walked out of it. I have an absolute passionate need to turn that negative into a positive, right? Okay. And nothing will stop me.
Likewise.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Because we've seen the pain, and we don't want, and we felt the pain, and we don't want others to feel it. And you want to be able to, in my case, I'm trying to give people the opportunity to talk about subjects that don't get talked about, distribute them so that, we're not, we can get this out en masse so that people have these conversations, right? It's really important to have tough conversations. Let's stop talking about the bloody weather
I
of the
think it's
football.
about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable,
Yeah,
making these
Mm.
conversations less taboo.
great
Because I
idea.
can
Yeah.
guarantee every
Tell me
single
about it.
person listening right now knows somebody who's being abused.
Of course.
And I think so much because of this stigma around not being able to speak up, even when you are being abused, because, oh, what are people going to think of me?
Yes.
I myself, even from my family who I was exceptionally close with at the time, I hid the abuse.
Yeah.
I wasn't a victim.
Because of shame.
I wasn't being abused.
Yeah.
I didn't,
Shame does
I
that.
would make sure
True.
it was all behind closed doors. I would strategically have conversations only when I knew, I knew if the conversation was going to get explosive,
Mhm.
I would pick a time and place to do it so that the abuse that I knew I was inevitably going to cop would be
Right.
hidden.
So are you able to control it and take him elsewhere to make that?
I would just make sure it was in the family home away from our children, or
Okay.
I would just make sure we weren't, I wasn't a catalyst for anything in a space where I didn't want that to occur.
Mm.
Can I ask you this? Okay. And I don't even know how to phrase this because I don't really know what the question is.
Mhm.
Did he chip at your self-esteem and
Mm.
your confidence to enough that you questioned yourself so much that you didn't that's why you didn't have the conversations. That's why you didn't speak to
That's a
others.
great
I-
question.
Questioned everything about my existence. Every reality, everything that was true to me became a question mark.
So you had self-doubt, in other words?
Absolutely, because the
Yeah.
abuse, the significant aspect of it was a 3-year duration. So from my weight loss surgery
Okay.
onwards till basically when I packed a bag and left.
Okay.
My self-esteem was trodden. I was a shadow of my former self,
Okay.
where basically they degrade you to a point where they essentially, to a degree, control your thoughts and your movements.
Mhm.
In the end, because we lived together, worked together, in hindsight, he knew my every movement.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't perceive it that way at the time, but literally knew I was never going to cheat, knew I was never going to, I wasn't doing anything because I was under his watchful eye.
I'm smiling because
Nearly
I lived this. This is
24/7.
amazing. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
So you went through like the same thing, but on the flip side.
No, absolutely. Everything you've said, I have lived. The only couple of additions.
Mhm.
So we worked together,
Mm.
a lot of sort of,
Yeah.
a lot of time together, a lot of kids. So we're raising them together. And I loved the fact that I had this wonderful family that, we spent so much time together. But
exactly how I felt.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Think, how good
It was
is
a
this?
privilege to me.
Well, it is a privilege
Yeah.
to be,
Mm.
as a dad, it was great to be at all the kids' school functions and their
Absolutely. There was
assemblies.
no 9 till 5.
No.
We weren't
Mm,
under the
mm, mm.
constraints of anything
Yeah,
because we
that's
made the
right.
rules.
The only difference I had, everything you've said is just you are literally telling my story. But the other side is I also had, she had a tracking device in my phone. So
Mhm.
she was tracking me everywhere I went.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yes. And by the way, years after our relationship ended, she still had that going on.
Mhm.
Yeah. Spy error software if anyone wants to be a horrible
You're
person.
kidding.
Yeah. It's
So she would
undetectable.
actually be spying on you.
Well,
Like
that's
all
pretty
the
standard
time.
behavior
Yeah,
in
well,
abusive
there you go.
scenarios these
Yep.
days.
So
That's
that going
pretty
on.
basic,
Crazy.
unfortunately.
I remember one of these is a silly little story that meant nothing to me at the time, right? Absolutely nothing to me at the time. But I walked out of Bunnings, okay, and I got the phone call and I picked up the phone and answered it. She goes, "What are you doing in Bunnings?" And I'm like, what? Right? She goes, I say, how the hell do you know I'm in Bunnings? I'm like, really?
Mhm.
I'm always in Bunnings. And jokingly, I was quite flippant about it. She goes, because you just spent XYZ dollars. Why have you
Mhm.
spent that money?
Yep.
Right? And I said, because we needed XYZ. And then I said, and how do you know I've spent this money? Right? On my credit card. Okay. And she goes, I have set up so that every time you use the credit card, I get a text message of the amount that you've spent and what you've been doing. Now, I might add that my credit card, whether I had excellent credit when we met, and she had terrible credit, my credit card when we met, hey, I only put $1,000 on it because I was like, hey, eBay and all that sort of thing, whatever. In the time we were together, she increased my limit to $50,000 and put every single cracker on that. Okay, and then left me with the debt. But that's fine. Okay, that's what, we can always make more money. Okay, but the day at Bunnings, I went, what is going on here? And I didn't realize I was being tracked. And later on, it became aware. And after our relationship ended, I realized. Well, I didn't realize I was actually told by a phone company that I was being tracked everywhere I went, and she had access to my diary, to my
It's a bit
messages.
scary,
Well, and I think
really.
too,
It's
like-
like one of those horror movies
but
that
did-
you
Yeah.
see, like a thriller, psychological thriller. So a question, because I know that we've only got an hour,
Mhm.
but what would you say to a person, both of you? Question for both of you. What would you say, you being on the male side, you being on the female side, to the person who's in a relationship that they are suffering, they're suspecting that they're, especially if it's not physical abuse, what would you say to them to do?
Michelle?
I think it's a very interesting time that we're living in now, even in comparison to myself, when my abuse occurred. So I'm 5 + 3, so 8 years ago. There was no Instagram. There was no, even though these memes that pop up, these inspirational videos, the amount of knowledge around narcissism now, about knowing your worth, I think it's completely different to when I was experiencing this abuse.
Okay.
There was none of that around me. But now it's in our faces every single day.
Yeah.
But is it in our faces because the algorithm has picked up on the fact that we're looking at this stuff? Because
Absolutely. What are you Googling?
Yeah.
Are you Googling? I remember
Yes.
myself in those acute phases where I had literally packed mine and my boys' things in a duffel bag and was in my parents' backyard in a donga, because that's where day one started for me.
Okay.
And I was Googling, why is XYZ happening to me? Why? And of course, if it had been a time like it is now, my Instagram and my Facebook would have picked up on those Google questions. So I think it's completely different now because of the way our phones track our every move and they listen to everything that leaves our mouth.
Yes.
Even if you were having a conversation with a girlfriend of, oh, he said this last night and, oh, he did this. Again, your phone's listening to that.
That's right.
Boom. You're then seeing information about. I think the biggest thing is asking questions, speaking to family and friends. 1800 respect. Googling.
So 1800 respect, that is actually a number that people can call.
Yes. So it's a counselling helpline where you can
Yeah.
basically talk about what you're experiencing, even if it's question marks, even if you're unsure if it's actually happening, because your reality is so skewed at this point, you don't really know.
No, you don't. You
know what's
You
going
lose
on.
yourself, right?
But is it true that the person who is the victim is also trapped a little bit, where they're almost like addicted or can't get away, or find themselves that they keep on returning to
I think
it?
it's not, I hate the word addiction when we talk about that kind of thing, because it's not an addiction. Nobody wants to be addicted to being
that's
abused.
right.
But I think what it is, I think I was an exception again in that rule. I'm a highly educated woman with a skill set in a lot of different areas.
Sure.
But traditionally, I believe that's not the case. So an abuser, say, for example, the woman is uneducated. So she doesn't have a skill set. She never went to TAFE. She never went to university. And she didn't really have a job before she had the kids.
Yeah.
And of course, he wants her in the family home as a homemaker. He goes to work. He knows exactly where she is, what she's doing at all times.
That's control right there.
So when it gets to this highly abusive state where you're thinking, oh God, I need to get out, because you're controlled emotionally, mentally, and financially, it's not as simple as
It's
I
not.
need to get
Just
out.
leaving.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
walk out the door because
Yeah,
then,
exactly.
in my case, all finances got cut.
Sure.
So we were running our
Mm.
own companies together, but finances, every single dollar got cut to me.
right.
So I was in my parents' backyard, and if it wasn't for my parents clothing, feeding, and providing for me and my
Mhm.
boys, we would have ended up in a women's refuge
Okay.
on people's couch. I dread to think what
Yeah.
would have happened if I didn't have my parents there. But if you're uneducated and you don't have a skill set and you've never worked, you don't have savings,
No.
and there's a good chance that the abuser is controlling the money. So you know that when you walk, you're walking with nothing.
Yes.
So I think the biggest thing is, if you're in, like, even joining a Facebook group,
Sure.
there's so many Facebook groups now where you can learn how to create a game plan. Where if you're being significantly abused, you need to be very, very strategic in how you create that game plan.
Mhm.
Even if it's chipping away $20 a week that won't get noticed by the abuser.
Yep.
You're building up a safety net. This process might take you 6 to 12 months. Who knows how long this process could take, but you need to be actively working on ways to get out, building up a safety net of money,
Yeah.
finding out where you can go. Do you have family and friends that if you rang tomorrow and said, even if they're unsuspecting of the abuse because you've hidden it,
Mm.
I'm in this situation and I need to get out hard and fast. Can you come and pick me up?
Yeah.
Or if you've emigrated, you don't have any family and friends, which is obviously 10 times worse.
Of course it is.
Where can I go? Researching women's refuge. But again, like, some of these people are so trapped, they can't Google search or do anything
Because they're
because
being
that's
watched.
being
Traced.
monitored as well.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
So
crazy.
it may even be a case of,
Mm.
if you are able to leave the house to go food shopping, it might be quietly talking to the person at IGA behind the register.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You, like, who knows what extremes people have to go
Yes.
to,
That's right.
Yes.
depending on how controlled they are.
That's so,
So
true.
I
And
hear definitely talking to people. Make sure you don't hide it. Because a lot of people, I know that the whole shame-based element of not wanting to own up to this is what I'm going through.
Mhm.
So talk to people, get into communities such as Facebook groups even, where you can get support. What would you say, Aaron?
I'm concerned about a couple of things you've said, because I think I think there are some very destructive Facebook groups out there.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying,
But I
please,
think it's like anything, it's filtering, isn't it?
exactly.
If
Just,
it doesn't make
Yes.
you feel good and if it doesn't align with you when you're reading
Mm.
it, you
Yep.
leave.
yeah, absolutely.
But there is,
Yep.
I know for me, Beanstalk. I'm sorry that I can't think of the name, but there was an incredible group for me.
Mhm.
It was actually a single mum
Okay.
page, which gave me everything when I was trying to leave.
Right.
So I think if you can find,
That's
absolutely, I
amazing.
agree with you that they can be very destructive, but if you
Yeah.
find the right space where you
I
align,
wouldn't want my statement I've just made to turn people off
Yep.
looking. Please look. Please look for ways
Yes,
out. Look for
yes.
answers. I'm going to bring up a couple of points, and please don't take this the way it's going to sound. I'm not trying to counteract your
No,
argument,
of
because
course.
we are absolutely on the same side
Mhm.
here. But I think
But you're on the edge.
well, I am. That's where I
No,
live.
but I agree
living
also
on the
with
edge.
what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
I mean, do you know how many men's refuges there are in Australia for male victims of domestic violence?
oof, I'm going to say not a lot, if
One.
any.
One. There is one, and it is
Oh,
run
that's
by
sad.
the Islamic Women's Association New South Wales in
Wow.
Parramatta. So it's a fair drive to say to go to Parramatta. There is nowhere to go if you're a male victim of domestic violence.
Guys, is someone out there ready to start
hang
a
on.
new mission?
My friend tried to.
Oh,
My friend actually went and bought a premise up in Geraldton, and short version of this is he started rebuilding the place. It was all damaged and that. He and his family were doing a wonderful job putting it together. They contacted the government about getting a grant because it was they wanted to create a men's place there for male victims of domestic violence, and they were told this: no. But hang on, but there's a but. But if you make it for women only, we'll give you $300,000. That's unfortunately what's going on here. Now, again, I don't
Jeez.
want to,
That
I'm
is
not trying to
sad.
counteract
That's
you.
really
I
sad.
just want people to know.
Yes,
'cause people
to be
don't know.
aware. So
People
what would you
don't-
say to the man, Aaron?
The man, you're screwed. Okay. That's my honest
is
story.
that
I've
all-
got no positivity here.
Did you hear
In
that,
my
guys?
case,
Sorry
case,
to tell you
you know,
that.
you're talking about the things that matter most to you, right? Now, the things that matter the most to me in the world, full stop, a big reason why this radio station exists and any of why I do anything in life is because my children were my absolute everything.
Your why.
My why. Thank you. He's spot on.
Mm,
And you need a why in life. This is so
You do.
important.
Mhm.
Now, my ex-wife used my children as weapons. While we were together, when
Because she knew that was the most important thing to you in the
Mm.
world.
absolutely. Now, when I did suggest that I was going to leave her, when I found out that she was cheating on me, and she seemed to think that was completely okay to be cheating,
Mhm.
because of that, I said I would leave. And she said, if you leave me, you will never see the children ever again.
Mhm.
Not once, not twice, quite repetitively, right? Now, so many men are living with this fear
Fear, yes.
because 84.1% of cases through the family court, you will lose your children forever if you're a man. So again, how about we put down our weapons here, that we stop this male-female carry-on, and we do what we do best, men and women working together to achieve our goals. How about we stop DV together? How about we
Yeah.
support each other together? How about we not do this man versus
You
woman
know what
carry-on?
I have found the biggest problem is? Each case needs to be assessed individually on its own merit.
Mhm.
But I've found every experience, and I've had many within the family court and other courts. I think at one stage I had 4 different court cases in 3 different courts.
Yep.
So I've experienced,
Wow.
I've dabbled in all of them because that was the weapon.
Yep.
I'm going to drown you in legal fees and lawyers and phone calls and emails until you cannot breathe.
The same story.
Mm-hmm. And what I've found is magistrate will come in, sit down. One of them's burped at me once after, he's finished his lunch.
You've got to be kidding
No,
me.
I've experienced it all.
Okay.
And half the time, like say post-assault for me, I had a 72-hour protection order from the WA police.
Okay.
I assumed that information would be on the screen in front of the magistrate. Oh, how very wrong I was. But COVID had just hit. I didn't get to see the duty lawyer. I was post-assault, barely able to string sentences together, and I had to walk into a courtroom in front of a magistrate to plead for 3 restraining orders without a clue how to do it.
Okay.
With
Wow.
no help.
So you'd been literally physically abused and you went through that.
Yep.
My goodness. No wonder you're a strong woman, Michelle.
So I was involved in a public assault that occurred in front of my children that actually went to criminal trial and
Okay.
has a successful conviction.
Okay.
So I got a successful conviction on the back of that. But again, in this scenario, only because I physically recorded the assault. So the threat on my physical life was so high post-separation, I recorded every conversation.
Good on you.
So I put my phone on record,
Yep.
put it into my bra where it just didn't know it was being recorded
Mhm.
because I was even being abused at school in front of other parents. And I thought this is really starting to escalate.
Mhm.
And fortunately for me, I think it was my biggest savior, my physical assault was recorded.
Okay.
And I believe if I didn't have that recording
Mhm.
and I went into a criminal trial because he pleaded not guilty to the assault,
Of course.
I believe if I didn't have that recording,
Mhm.
would I have got a successful conviction?
Terry, you asked me before about the advice I would
Yeah.
give. My advice is record
Yes.
everything.
Mhm.
Absolutely
Okay.
everything. Because as I sit here,
Yep.
again, listening to
Yes.
you, and you are
Yep.
so right, I sit here and I'm not in jail because I was recording.
Wow.
Because my
It
ex-wife
literally is the key.
created evidence.
Yes.
Mhm.
yes.
Created evidence, faked
Yeah.
evidence, and I had the whole thing recorded. The whole thing set me up all down the team.
Yep.
And no problem. I got arrested, thrown in the back of the paddy wagon,
Mhm.
sat there for 8 hours on the cold concrete floor, treated like absolute filth. Go through the whole process. You've experienced, so much of this as well. And ultimately, if I didn't have that video, then I would be in jail probably today. That's the reality of life. And
Yeah.
what's even more, it angers me, actually, genuinely angers me, is okay, making a false statement to police is a criminal offence. And when I asked the police if there would be charges laid, they said,
But see, this is the thing, right? So we've been to many court appearances,
Mm.
and because he pleaded not guilty to assaulting me in
Sure.
front of our children in an act of family violence, we then went to criminal trial.
Yep.
So this was a year post-assault because that's how long we had to wait for
it
the
does
trial.
take a long time.
So they were originally going to deny my recording as evidence because it was recorded without his consent.
Well,
I pleaded
That's
with
crazy, isn't
it has to be recorded without his consent because that's the threat.
Imagine, oh, can I just record you while you're
Yes,
bashing me
correct.
up?
That was how I was driven at the time. But then it just goes to show how they're wired.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the
Mm.
stand. They accepted. So the police, the prosecutor listened to my evidence and they allowed it.
Okay.
So I was stood on trial on the stand. They played me and my children being assaulted at volume to the courtroom.
Wow.
I can't ever listen to that recording again.
No,
It's
I know.
No.
yeah. So I had to stand in court listening to that recording live, listening to my own kids scream, all those things. It was played out live minute for minute. There was no misconstruing what happened. It was very, very black and white. After it was finished recording, the magistrate let me collect myself. And then he was given the opportunity to take the stand or not to defend himself.
Sure.
There was no defending
How
yourself.
could you?
It was just played live. It
Mm.
wasn't my word against his. Everybody was very clear on that. He took the stand.
Wow. Oh, that's some clear narcissism
He
right there.
took
Wow.
the stand. And I sat, and these were massive light bulb moments for me where something can be so scientifically black and
Mhm.
white.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the hardest lesson for me to learn is they're so convinced of their own reality, their own lies, that they don't actually believe they're lying.
Yeah.
I know that sounds odd, but it was the hardest lesson for me to learn because he would take the stand after we had just heard in live time what had actually occurred. He took the stand and tried to change the
Defend
narrative
himself.
and defend himself
Yeah.
when there was, even his lawyer was
Mm.
stumbling on his words
Yeah.
because there was no defense.
Because he is not wired like we are.
Correct.
Simple as that.
Mm.
Literally,
Yeah.
that level of it's a mental illness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly a personality type, but they are wired differently. They don't feel empathy. They do feel that they're telling the truth. They don't actually realize, and a lot of these people have become very good at lying. Well, a lot of I think lying is their sort of their standard practice, but of actually pretending and actually faking empathy. I think a lot of them actually
Right.
become really good
Wow.
mimics in that regard. In fact, I've read a lot
Clever.
about that. Yeah. So,
yeah.
and I've certainly experienced it myself.
Yeah.
There are so many different aspects here, which is just, it's heartbreaking to see, and the damage that they're doing to, okay, if you're doing this to the person you love, right? First of all, I mean, that's revolting on every level. But with your kids involved, I mean,
That's
this
it.
is just,
Yeah,
it just
that's
takes it to a
right.
whole different level. And
Mm.
as I say, the legal system is weaponized like you cannot believe. It
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really is. And the people involved with it, I mean, look, there's a lawyer right now in Perth, okay, who has been found guilty of deliberately misleading his clients and dragging the case out for years and years in family court, right? Slap on the wrist, right? Okay, absolutely no consequences. This particular lawyer won Family Lawyer of the Year, right?
Cheapers.
The whole system is a mess, and we live in Western Australia. The rest
Yep.
of Australia runs under a different family law rule, right? It's the
Mm.
same umbrella,
Yes.
but we have our own individual one.
Yep.
I have a gentleman who I was supporting who was who attempted suicide, and he, I'll just get to the story. It's the best way to do it. He went through family court. He spent $165,000, which is not a big spend.
Which is
by the way.
easy to do.
It's very, it's not a big spend these
Mhm.
days. Okay. 165 grand. He won. His wife was found to be lying, all kind of thing. So he was given the joint custody. He was given, when I say he was joint custody, he was only given every second weekend. Okay. So he wasn't given a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he walks away thinking, at least I'm going to see my kids again. How great is
Yeah.
this? Okay. My life is going to be back on track.
She didn't comply.
Oh, no way. Straight on. She got straight onto a plane, moved to Queensland. The whole case must start again.
Oh,
So
gosh.
there, all of that 165 grand gone. It's just fly away. I have another gentleman who I was supporting in a similar situation. The most quiet, he'd write a hell of an email, put it that way. Quiet gent, really lovely guy. Same thing. He spent, glad we're all sitting down, $400,000 on legal fees. Okay. End of the day, she doesn't comply. She
It's a
doesn't
tricky
doesn't show
trap.
up to drop the kids off. Just doesn't, and there are no
Mm.
consequences. Every time they go back to court, it costs him 4 to 10 grand.
You know what, on that subject, I think it's really interesting for people potentially listening who are in, this domestic abuse space, experiencing this as we speak. My biggest advice when having to co-parent, where you do have children, if you don't share children,
Yeah.
you get a restraining order, you try and move on. It's a hell of a lot easier, obviously, to move on when you
No
don't
doubt
share
about it,
children.
yeah.
Yep.
My only savior in co-parenting in my current scenario is consent orders.
Okay.
So I legally control every minute of my boys' lives.
Mhm.
So when they go to school, medical, extracurricular, his birthday, my birthday, their birthdays, Easter, Christmas, whatever it may be, we have a default for everything.
Okay.
So I forced a court situation where we were made to sit down, decide a default setting. I'm talking to the hour on the clock.
Sure. Yeah. No.
So
no,
that
no.
when there's catalysts and when conversations occur and when things erupt, there's no, oh, you don't get the kids back today. No. We don't have any of that.
Mhm.
The kids aren't
Wow.
pawns in the game. This is not how this is going to work.
But the
And
kids become the pawns in
absolutely,
the game.
but
Yeah, this is
consent
the
consent
sad part.
orders
This is
has
the
been my
saddest part.
savior,
Yeah.
Okay.
because if they don't comply with consent orders, you have legal power.
You don't. Because here's the problem. When people don't comply with consent orders, you go back, you put an intervention order in or whatever the case may be. You go fill all your paperwork in, you pay your lawyer thousands and thousands of dollars, or you go and represent yourself and get treated like absolute filth, right? You go in there and the judge or magistrate says, naughty, shouldn't have done that. Don't do it again. Goodbye. Now that costs you typically a day in court like that, okay, costs you $4,000 to $10,000, depending on the quality of your lawyer. Okay, $4,000 will get you a pretty crappy one for the day, which pretty much is most of them. The word lawyer and liar are very similar. Anyway, I don't have a high opinion of most of them. There are some wonderful ones out there, like everything, but generally speaking, yeah, certainly with family court. So, okay, you're out $4,000. Say you've had a really, really cheap day out, $4,000, okay? Doesn't mean anything. That person will breach those orders again. They'll come up with some lame, ridiculous excuse, or they just don't show up. And you go back and back and back. And each time the magistrate or the judge just goes, naughty, please don't do that.
Well, again, it's such individual experiences too, isn't it? Because consent orders have been my savior.
Yeah. And this is where we will absolutely have a different experience, because
Absolutely.
So with me, I obviously, because of the fact of my gender, I particularly deal with men who are going through this situation. I have supported many women as well. Okay. But to a 90-10 kind of percentage.
You stand for men. You stand for the
yeah.
men, and somebody needs to do that.
Well,
And it's so
but again, well, yes and no. Like we all need to. We shouldn't be. I shouldn't. You know what I mean? For me, in a perfect world, as a guy who's got wonderful women in his life, I've got more female friends than male friends. You know, I should be supporting women to the same ratio.
Yeah, it's not about sort of, you know, saying that everybody's in a box. It's really about saying, you know, I support men that have gone through DV, and you know, I'm an advocate, and I'm a person who can say, I know what you're going through. I've, you know, worked with a lot of guys who've lost their children, perfectly nice people, and you know, it's sad, but it's even sadder for the kids.
Of course it is.
And it takes a really big parent, like you were saying about what the family dynamics say and how the kids will relate, you know what they hear being said about you, which is absolutely, can't even say it on radio here, Aaron, because it's all swear words, but it's absolutely crazy. And to put kids through that is diabolical. But, you know, I guess because this conversation could go on all night.
Yeah.
but I
Oh,
was
look, we've
just
well
about
and
to
truly
say,
passed the hour. And I don't
just-
care, because I think it's such an
Yeah.
important conversation. Yeah,
it is
really
an important conversation, but I'd love to ask, because Michelle, you stand there, you sit there, should I say, you're a tower of strength. And, you know, I went through a court case 2 weeks ago, and that's probably why I ended up so ill. And I'm just going, after listening to this situation, I'm like, I've got nothing here. I mean, I've got a house at stake. We've got a whole breach going on with that. And then I've got a hurdle of other things that are unfolding in my life right now. And I listened to your story and what you've been through, even right to having to live with your parents and almost have to, you know, sort of almost consider women's refuge and everything you've been through. And then look at you today and such a great ambassador. What do you think you've actually got, like dynamically character. I mean, it's not about personality, but it's about your character. What do you believe you've actually won through this inside your character and who you are today?
My gosh, there's so many lessons for me. I think the biggest one is that I know I'm enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Like, and
That's
that's what
great.
I would say
Yeah.
Beautiful.
to that 8-year-old me.
Yep.
You are enough.
Yeah.
You are capable of anything. I feel so unstoppable now.
I love that.
Like, I just recently walked into a boardroom with Mercedes-Benz,
Mhm.
4 men at a boardroom table, and I held my own to the
Good on
point
you.
where they sat there with their jaws open.
Good stuff. Love it.
And I just find now I've almost forgot what it is to experience nerves, which now I seek nervousness.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I seek the
so you've
uncomfortable.
been through so much
Mhm.
that you've got like nerves bulletproof. You're like
Yeah, like
bulletproof.
throw me into a room of
Wow.
1,000 people that I don't
like
know,
that. Mhm.
and they'll know my name by the end of that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just so thankful.
Mm.
And I think because of my physical transformation,
Mm.
you know, I'm
Mm.
literally physically half the woman I was, but double the woman.
But double the
Yeah,
woman.
you're a new woman.
I love
like, quite
that.
literally.
Yeah.
Double the woman.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah, so
10x.
lost 60 kilos. I just went through
Yeah.
an 18-month journey of surgically reconstructing my body head to toe. I had the old me cut off,
Right.
and I am so in my power, and I feel like this was who I was always meant to be.
Yep. So it's made you unstoppable.
Yeah,
It's given you that, that revolution of knowing that you are enough. And it's
Absolutely.
it's made you bulletproof.
I think
What
you
can I
can be,
say?
you can make yourself out of adversity. Okay. Like you can just
Mhm.
make this decision. I go, I can be a professional victim. I can whinge and sook and
Yes.
I can
and
live in this pain.
I hate the word victim.
oh,
Yeah.
hate it with
I'm
a
a
Yeah.
passion.
survivor. I'm a warrior.
Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
not a
You are.
victim.
Go warrior. I like that. That's a
Yes.
winner.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
the master of
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
destiny, not the victim of your history.
And I'm thankful for the lessons. Did I ever want to be abused like I was? And still, so mine is still very active. My children are still of an age where, they're not autonomous in the eyes of the family court. So
Okay.
I'm still actively being abused, if we want to put that,
Yeah,
very,
no.
very much.
I understand.
But people will say to me, Michelle, why don't you hate him for what he did to you? Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you, seeking revenge? For me, that's wasted emotion. I'm beyond him.
I love it. I love it.
I genuinely look at him now and I feel sadness when I look at him because I know him to his core. He's the
Right.
man that I fell in love with, that I chose to father my children. And that's a big deal to me. And I just
Thoroughly
look at
agree.
him and I just feel like the level of self-loathing and what it must be like to live inside his head.
Imagine being in there.
That
But-
he
yeah.
spends, we're 5 years post-separation, but the obsession with me is more real than when I walked away.
Wow.
And I just think, you're repartnered. You took everything. You have our companies, our marital home, and every cent that we own.
Unbelievable.
I walked with nothing.
no,
but
but you
still-
walked with you.
Absolutely.
away
I had
and
my
you-
spirit.
Yeah.
I had my soul, and he's never broken that.
And that's
And
fantastic.
he will not break me.
Uh,
And if I have to have another 3 years in me because
Mhm.
of the family court lackings, I'll do it.
I know you will. I can see it in you. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. We can look when it comes to the house or the financial stuff or whatever, obviously it hurts, right?
Mhm.
Okay. But at the same time, who cares? You can always make more money. You can always,
Mhm.
Build new
Your
things.
happiness is worth
Oh,
more
it's
than
worth-
any monetary thing.
absolutely, yeah. And I understand what you're saying about with my ex. I feel I feel sorry for her because I think to myself, like, what must it be like to live in that brain?
Well, I just think too, like 5 years post separation,
Mm,
if I was repartnered, which she has been for more than 4 years,
right.
if you were truly so happy in your new life, you've got everything. You've got the new partner, you've got our marital home,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
you've got our companies
Mhm.
that you're profiting off of what I largely built with you.
Yep.
You've got it all. You took everything you possibly
No,
could from me.
You're wrong.
But what do you have? Do you really have it all? You have all the physical things and you took
Yeah.
everything you possibly could from me, but you spend your every day focusing on trying to destroy me.
because they have an obsession for control,
Mhm.
right? He needs to control you.
Yep.
And it's 5 years. In my case, it's 8 years. Okay. And it's still going on today, literally today,
Mhm.
right?
Ditto.
Absolutely happening. So I think it's really important that that those who have gone through this understand that you need to, from your own personal standpoint, you have to step back. You have to forgive, if you like, and move away, because they're not going to. If these people who have these personality traits, they are incapable of stepping away. They're incapable of losing that need to control you.
Yeah, and I think what I learned too is in the research that I did, I'm not seen as human. You're seen as an object.
Okay.
I'm an object to him.
Really?
He controls me.
Yep.
And he lost control of that object, like a watch, a wallet, or a car.
Sure.
And he's getting it back at all costs, to the point where a magistrate threatened him that if he continues with this process and this vendetta of what he's got to lose. And he stoically looked a magistrate in the face and said, I'm prepared to lose everything.
Wow.
Which,
Oh, you can pick them. You've done well, Michelle. Tell you what.
I've picked,
Yeah.
cream of the crop. But I now have a compartment inside my head. This is how I compartmentalize it, because people are like, how do you deal with this on the daily? How do you thrive? How do you achieve the things that you are beyond this while still being actively trapped? I give the time and space when it needs it.
Yep.
I put it in the box and I shut the lid. And then I reopen that box. If I get a phone call from my lawyer, an email, address it, shut the box again, and continue to be my goddamn fabulous self.
Oh, Michelle, you're thinking like a man. That's how we do it. Okay? We put everything in boxes. Trust me.
I'm not giving him any more energy than what's required. You're getting bare minimum.
Why would you let him live rent-free in your head? Okay? He wants that control. He wants that. He wants to, and he thinks that it's hurting you, right? And ultimately you move on with your life.
He lost the best thing that ever happened to him.
Yeah.
And he knows that.
Oh, yeah.
Would those words ever leave his mouth?
No.
God, no.
But it'll burn every day. So, and so if you have to have revenge, which is probably, it's not healthy, but we all want a little bit. The fact that he's got that burn, that can be your revenge, right?
I think a 60-kilo weight loss and,
Yeah. Check it out. Hello.
Yeah.
Look at what you're missing.
A bold
here.
red lip and a size 8 jumpsuit. I think it'll do the job.
Hey, whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you, I'm all for it. All right, I think we need to end here
Yes,
because,
we do.
well,
We could
we've
talk
only
all
run
night.
about 40
My
minutes
voice
over.
gave out, guys.
Oh,
Sorry.
all
That was
good.
it.
All good.
I just had one of my coughing fits.
We made it
all
through.
Good. But
No, I'm glad you're okay. Okay.
I'm alive.
We did line up with water, but we didn't actually take a break at any point. So there we go. I want to thank you guys for both being here. Michelle, you're very, very wonderful to have you here and have that conversation. And thank you on a personal point because you've made me feel on a personal level validated. Okay, the fact that your experiences were so similar to mine, it's a problem shared's a problem halved, and it's really sad that you've gone through that. But kind of thank you for taking some of that pain away.
For people listening, that you're not crazy.
You're not crazy.
No, you're
No.
not crazy.
That
Yeah.
you're not everything that they say you are.
Oh yeah.
But because your computer's being programmed on the daily, you think you are that. You're not.
When people tell you that you're the problem, that you're crazy, that you're mentally ill, all of these things on a constant basis, you start to go, hang on,
Of
am I?
course you do.
You start
Yeah,
to believe it.
Yeah. Especially when it's the
Yes.
person you trust and you love and you've got so much faith in them, right? This is the person you've chosen to spend the rest of your
I
life
married
with.
my soulmate.
Yeah. Well, perhaps you didn't. Just saying.
Perhaps I did.
Yes.
I would just keep sight of who you've become and that bulletproof, unstoppable, and just amazing woman that you are. And
you are
Aaron, your
enough.
mission as well, amazing.
Oh, look, I think the mission is for any of us who have gone through this experience or anything like it is to try and stop others from having it. And we can't do that obviously for everyone, but if we can help those who have gone through it, I think there's a lot
That's
of value in
right.
it.
I
for
think
us.
that's my mission now, showing people, and this is why I share my life on the daily, that there is life beyond abuse. You can thrive. You will find your voice again.
Got that, guys?
You will find
There
your voice.
is
We'll
life
find that voice again. All right.
beyond
I think
abuse.
we'll end on
Yes,
that.
thank you.
Thank you very much for everyone who's on the live stream, which I haven't flicked the right button to actually see the comments come up, which is very clever of me, but never mind. I'm sure we can look at those later. And look, I just would love to just ask everybody to have a wonderful week and look after each other. If you see someone out
Absolutely.
there who might be at the supermarket or whatever, just share experiences
Yep.
and be there for the people around you.
Kindness is free.
It very much
That's
is.
it.
All right, with that,
Yes.
that's the end of the stream. It's Edge, Radio Australia.
Ciao, ciao. Sorry, my voice just caved in.
Have you ended it, or you got to go down and
End.
click end
See,
stream?
end stream.
Do you have to go down and click on that again?
I do. Oh, wrong mouse.
And here's our
Too
Gen
mu-
X
too